music mogul to legal hot water, huh?
Oh, yeah.
This deep dive takes us into the world of Sean Diddy Combs.
All right.
You probably know him for his, chart-topping hits. But he's facing some serious charges right now. Sex trafficking, racketeering,
Wow.
the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And as if that wasn't enough,
Right.
there's a new twist to this whole thing.
Okay.
Accusations of witness tampering.
Oh, interesting.
We've got a Los Angeles Times article here that breaks down the prosecution's claims
Right.
and the defense's response.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because these new allegations could have a major impact on the entire case.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Sure.
What exactly is the prosecution alleging here?
Well, they're saying that Diddy has been trying to manipulate witnesses from behind bars.
Okay.
They found handwritten notes in his jail cell that they believe point to some pretty serious tactics, potentially even blackmail to silence witnesses or get them to testify in his favor.
Hold on, blackmail.
Yeah.
That's a whole different level of legal trouble, isn't it?
It certainly raises the stakes.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is that the prosecution is drawing parallels to tactics used by organized crime,
Oh, wow.
like the mob.
Okay.
They're trying to establish a pattern of behavior that suggests a deliberate and calculated attempt to obstruct justice.
So it's not just about the notes themselves,
Right.
but about what they represent.
Easy
A
to follow.
potential strategy to influence the case from inside jail.
Exactly. And they're not just speculating.
Yeah.
They're presenting specific examples.
Okay.
They point to Diddy allegedly using other inmates' phone codes to make calls, three-way calling,
Wow.
even using a third-party communication service.
Wow. It sounds like he was pulling out all the stops.
It seems that way.
They even mention a specific example
Yeah.
involving a witness too, right?
Right. And this is where it gets even more compelling.
Okay.
There was communication with this witness.
Mhm.
And then the prosecution found notes suggesting a payment was made
Oh, wow.
after the witness posted a statement online.
Really?
If they can prove that link, it would be pretty damning evidence.
And I bet the prosecution is using all of this to argue that Diddy should be denied bail.
That's a classic move in cases where there's concern about witness tampering.
Right.
They'll argue that he's a flight risk or that he poses a danger to witnesses if he's released.
So how is Diddy's team fighting back against these accusations?
Their main argument hinges on the idea of attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
They're saying those notes weren't part of some scheme to tamper with witnesses, but were actually confidential communications between Diddy and his lawyers.
Right.
Notes about trial strategy and legal advice.
Okay.
They're arguing that the search of his cell violated that privilege.
I see. So it's a question of whether those notes were truly legal strategy or something more nefarious.
Right.
But how much privacy can someone really expect in jail?
Yeah.
Isn't that a bit of a gray area?
It is.
Yeah.
Attorney-client privilege is a bedrock principle in our legal system,
Right.
meant to protect the confidentiality of those communications. But you're right.
Yeah.
Inmates have limited rights to privacy,
Right.
especially when it comes to potential criminal activity.
So it sounds like a classic legal battle.
It is.
The right to a fair trial versus the need to investigate potential wrongdoing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it raises some interesting questions about how these principles apply in the unique setting of a jail.
Right.
For example, you've got these taint teams they use to handle potentially privileged material during searches.
Taint teams.
Yeah.
That sounds intense.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
Think of them as a legal firewall.
Okay.
They're made up of agents who are completely separate from the main investigation.
Right.
Their job is to review any seized materials and identify anything that might be protected by attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
If they find something, it gets redacted and the main team never sees it.
Oh, so it's all about preventing the case from getting tainted by a potentially inadmissible evidence.
Exactly.
Look at
It's
that.
a way to balance the need to investigate with the need to protect those fundamental legal rights.
Right.
But in this case, the question is whether the prosecution overstepped those boundaries when they seized those notes.
Diddy's lawyers are also arguing that his constitutional rights were violated, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're claiming that the search of his cell was unlawful, a violation of due process.
Right.
So it's not just about attorney-client privilege.
Right.
It's about whether the government went too far in their pursuit of evidence.
So we've got this legal tug of war going on.
Yeah.
The prosecution trying to build a case. The defense pushing back against the way evidence was gathered.
Right.
Okay.
And the outcome of this fight over the notes could have a significant impact on the overall case.
Okay, let's step back for a second and remind ourselves what Diddy is actually accused of in this case.
He's facing charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution.
Right.
The allegations are pretty serious.
Yeah.
He and his associates are accused of luring women into situations where they were then coerced into sexual acts.
And these are called freak-offs, right?
That's what the indictment alleges, yeah.
It's pretty disturbing stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
And the potential penalties for these charges are very serious.
Right.
We could be talking about a significant prison sentence if he's convicted.
Wow.
Yeah.
So these witness tampering allegations add another layer of complexity to an already serious situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it all plays into this question of power dynamics.
Yeah.
How does someone like Diddy, with his fame and fortune, navigate the legal system?
Right.
How does that play out in the courtroom and in the court of public opinion?
It's almost like a real-life legal drama unfolding before our eyes.
It is.
And I have to admit, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
I want to understand what makes the prosecution's case so strong and what arguments Diddy's team is using to counter their claims.
Let's dive deeper into that then.
Okay.
The prosecution's case hinges on a few key things.
Okay.
They're trying to paint a picture of a deliberate and calculated attempt to obstruct justice.
Right.
And they're pointing to a pattern of behavior.
Right.
Multiple alleged attempts by Diddy to contact potential witnesses from prison.
And the fact that they're alleging he used different methods,
Right.
Inmates' phone codes, three-way calling, that third-party communication service makes
Yeah.
it seem even more intentional, right?
Yeah.
Like he was trying to cover his tracks.
That's what they're going for.
Yeah.
They're trying to show premeditation
Yeah.
and intent.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that example with witness 2
Right.
and the alleged payment.
Right.
If they can prove a direct connection between the communication,
Yeah.
the statement, and the payment,
Right.
that would be a significant blow to Diddy's defense.
It would definitely raise some serious questions about his motives.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the prosecution side.
Right.
What about the defense?
Yeah.
What are their strongest arguments?
That attorney-client privilege argument is a big one.
Right.
It's a fundamental legal principle.
Right.
And if they can convince the judge that those notes fall under that protection,
Yeah.
it would really weaken the prosecution's case.
But wouldn't the fact that he's in jail make a difference?
It does.
I mean, doesn't that limit his expectation of privacy?
It's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
Even in jail, attorney-client privilege still holds weight.
Okay.
But the circumstances definitely complicate things.
Right.
The defense will have to prove that those notes were truly confidential legal communications and not something else entirely.
So it sounds like the content of those notes is crucial.
It is.
What were they actually about?
That's what everyone's waiting to see.
Yeah.
Were they detailed legal strategy discussions?
Right.
Were they clearly labeled as attorney-client communication?
Right.
Those kinds of details could make all the difference in how the judge rules.
It's like a legal thriller.
It is.
You're on the edge of your seat,
Yeah.
waiting to see what bombshell might drop next.
Exactly.
And of course, this is all happening under the microscope of public opinion.
That's a huge factor in any high-profile case.
Right.
But especially one involving a celebrity like Diddy.
Right.
Think about it. We've got these incredibly serious charges.
Yeah.
Allegations of witness tampering.
Right.
And then you layer on top of that the constant media scrutiny, the social media chatter.
Right.
It creates this pressure cooker environment.
I imagine it makes it that much harder for everyone involved
It does.
to focus on the facts of the case
Yes.
and the legal arguments.
There's this risk that the media narrative starts to overshadow the actual legal proceedings.
And you can't underestimate the power of public perception,
No, you can't.
especially when it comes to a jury.
Right.
How do you find impartial jurors who haven't already formed opinions?
That's one of the biggest challenges in these types of cases.
Yeah.
The defense will likely argue that the media attention has tainted the jury pool, making it impossible for Diddy to get a fair trial.
It's a tough situation.
It is.
So let's say the prosecution can prove these witness tampering allegations.
Okay.
What are the potential consequences for Diddy?
The implications are huge.
Yeah.
It would significantly damage his credibility,
Right.
making it harder for the jury to believe anything he says or any defense his lawyers put forward.
It's like you said earlier.
Yeah.
It raises the stakes even higher.
It does.
It's not just about the original charges anymore.
Right.
It's about his willingness to manipulate the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it could lead to additional charges being filed against him.
Wow.
Witness tampering is a serious offense on its own.
Right.
Plus, it gives the prosecution even more ammunition to argue against granting him bail.
Right.
They'll say he's a flight risk or that he poses a danger to witnesses.
Yeah. So these allegations could have a domino effect on the entire case.
They could.
Even if they don't directly relate to the original charges.
Right.
What I find really interesting is the audacity of it all.
Yeah.
If true, it's almost like a power move, isn't it?
It is.
Like he thought he could control the narrative from behind bars.
It's a fascinating psychological aspect of this case.
Yeah.
What was going through his mind?
Right.
Was it desperation, overconfidence,
Right.
a belief that his fame and fortune would somehow shield him from the consequences?
It makes you wonder how much his celebrity status played a role in his decision-making.
It does.
Do you think someone in his position might feel like the rules don't apply to them?
It's certainly a question worth considering.
Yeah.
We often see these cases where wealthy and powerful individuals seem to operate under a different set of rules.
It's almost like the classic tale of hubris,
Right.
the arrogance of power leading to a downfall.
Exactly.
But it's not just about Diddy, right?
Yeah.
This whole issue of witness tampering has broader implications for our justice system as a whole.
Absolutely.
Right.
It strikes at the heart of fairness and due process.
Right.
If people are afraid to come forward,
Yeah.
if they fear retaliation or intimidation, the entire system breaks down.
It makes you wonder how often this kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
Maybe not with celebrities, but in everyday cases. It's a scary thought.
Yeah.
That someone could be manipulating the system, silencing witnesses,
Right.
and potentially getting away with it.
It's a sobering reminder of the fragility of our justice system
Yeah.
and how important it is to protect those who are willing to come forward and speak truth to power.
So what can be done to combat witness tampering?
Well,
Are there any safeguards in place to protect people who might be vulnerable to intimidation or threats?
there are a number of measures in place, thankfully.
Okay.
Law enforcement agencies have specialized units that focus specifically on investigating witness tampering, and prosecutors take these cases very seriously.
So there are people working behind the scenes
Yeah.
to ensure that witnesses can feel safe and confident about coming forward?
Exactly.
Okay.
And there are programs in place to protect witnesses,
Mhm.
things like relocation, providing security,
Right.
even offering new identities in extreme cases.
Wow.
But it's an ongoing battle,
Yeah.
and it requires a collective effort from law enforcement, the courts,
Right.
and the community to make sure justice prevails.
This deep dive has certainly opened my eyes to the complexities of the legal system
Yeah.
and the challenges of ensuring a fair trial, especially when you have someone like Diddy with his fame and fortune involved.
It's a fascinating case study
Yeah.
that exposes the intersection of celebrity, power, and justice.
Right.
And it raises important questions about how we, as a society, perceive and respond to allegations of wrongdoing
Right.
when they involve high-profile figures.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We
Half
have
of
it.
the original charges.
Right.
The witness tampering allegations, the legal strategies, the role of the media, the potential consequences.
Right.
But for me, the biggest takeaway is the human element.
It is.
We're talking about real people's lives being impacted,
Yeah.
both the alleged victims and Diddy himself.
That's crucial to remember.
Right.
Behind the legal arguments and the media headlines,
Yeah.
there are human stories unfolding with real pain and real consequences.
And we can't forget that the outcome of this case will have a ripple effect far beyond the courtroom.
It will.
It will shape public perception,
Yeah.
influence legal precedents, and
Yeah.
potentially spark broader conversations about accountability, power, and justice.
It's a reminder that these cases are not just about individual guilt or innocence,
Mm-hmm.
but about upholding the principles that underpin our legal system
Right.
and our society as a whole.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I'm left with a lingering question for you to consider. What does this whole situation say about the price of fame and the lengths people will go to
Yeah.
protect their reputations, their power, and ultimately their freedom?
It's a question that goes far beyond this specific case
Yeah.
and touches on something deeply human.
Right.
The desire for control, the fear of losing everything, and the lengths we'll go to preserve our own self-image.
Right.
It's a question that deserves careful thought and honest introspection.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. So until next time, stay curious and stay informed.